thank you so much for joining us. I am Rhonda Boyle, and welcome to the Soar Pro webinar for this week. I'm really excited to introduce you to our guest today. We're going to be talking about a really hot topic that a lot of coaches have to face, and that is, what do you do and how do you talk about StrengthsFinder when you cannot you don't have any assessment results? You know, what's the first steps to evangelizing the strengths movement, whether it's somebody with 25 seconds on an elevator or you have a 45-minute presentation to give and the recipients won't have had taken that test. So that's what we're going to talk about today. A great conversation. And we are here with the amazing Murray Guest out of Australia. And let me just tell you a little bit about Murray. So Murray is a Gallup certified strengths coach, and he has more than 15 years experience leading cultural change in large organizations. Combining his knowledge in shifting attitudes, leadership, and a passion for strengths, he partners with business leaders to inject new energy into their organizations and build an inspired culture that drives business performance and encourages success both personally and professionally. He's helped over 1,200 people unlock their talents and strengths, and he's worked with organizations to integrate strengths into their entire culture. So he is also the co-author of, if I can just brag, Turning Talents into Strengths, Stories of Coaching Transformation, international bestseller. Welcome, Murray Guest. Glad you're here, sir.
Thank you so much, Rhonda, for that beautiful introduction. I'm so excited to be here for this first Soar webinar, catching up with you and chatting. Your energy is so infectious, and I'm so excited to have so many people with us today. Yes, down in Australia, so it's actually 11 a.m. here on Tuesday, about 6 p.m. on Monday, so good morning, good afternoon. And I think this is a great topic to kick off this series with. And I've been thinking about this for a while since we talked about as to what we can talk about today. And I just wanted to actually set the scene a little bit around us as coaches and how what we do day in, day out aligns with the purpose and the legacy of Don Clifton. And that fundamental question that he had around, let's look at what's right with people rather than fixating with what's wrong with them. And when I think about that, I think about my own experience in 2012, so over 6 years ago, doing my strengths assessment for the first time and thinking this language, this framework, but even more importantly, what I've come to realize, the intent of that question and what it means. So I think today what we can explore is it's actually more about the intent and that philosophy about what's right with people and what they bring, their talents and their strengths, rather than, hey, you're wrong, you need to think about it and do it my way. And that's what I think fundamentally we're all about as coaches. Mm-hmm. So for me, that conversation that we were actually talking earlier about, it could be like a minute in the lift, in the elevator. Or, hey, we want to do this strengths thing. You've got half an hour to present it to our leaders, but they haven't done their assessment. What are you going to talk about? So there's a couple of different variations that come up for SOAR coaches, where at different times we've got to cover a different level of detail to get people excited as we are and about our passion that we have about this. Rhonda, how often do you think people get this question about what is this all about? How do you actually do this when someone hasn't done the assessment?
I think it happens a lot. I have it happen to me. How about everybody else? If you can chat in the chat box, tell us how often that happens for you, where someone invites you to do a presentation to a group, but no, sorry, they're not going to have taken the assessment. How often does that happen for you? If you want to chat in and let us know. I have had it happen. In fact, let me think. Last Monday, Tuesday, I'm sorry. I did a presentation with a bunch of bankers, and they had not yet taken the assessment and weren't going to. They got gifted the book at the meeting, but they had not had the opportunity to take it. So I had to go in and explain what it was without knowing what their talents were. So that was, it does put you in a kind of a precarious position where you have to use other ways in order to convey the, what it actually means.
Yeah. And I'd like to, I guess, build on that with a conversation that my wife and I had recently. So we run a couple of retreats every year for natural health practitioners. And we were talking about what it means to have this approach in our relationship as a married couple. And Tammy put it beautifully. She said, when that sort of abrasiveness comes up around this difference of approach, which is quite often the way we approach it through our dominant strengths. And what she said is that's quite often something coming up for her as opposed to me doing something wrong. And then that opens up for this discussion about, well, then what is it coming up for her or coming up for me? And then we start to unpack that from this perception and this welcomeness of, okay, where are you coming from and what can I learn from that? And what do you bring that I don't bring? So I think whether it's, as you said, a group of bankers, it is in a couple, in a relationship with a group of leaders, I mean, the list goes on. It's just that approach of, what is it that you bring that I don't, and how can I embrace that? So in my work, Rhonda, as you said in the intro, I work a lot with leaders in business and helping leaders come together. And one of the biggest things I think I want to share with people today is it's actually inviting people to let go of the stuff that they've been holding on to around other people. Because quite often what happens is I'll go into a business, into an organization, and some leaders say, look, we need to work with a team because Rhonda does this and that's not quite right way. And Murray has this approach and he doesn't do it the way I think. And Nate does it this way and it's not what it says in the job description, blah, blah, blah. And the first step is, I think we need to let that go. Because the more we hang on to that, it actually inhibits the opportunity to actually look at what's right with people. So quite often my first conversation and with leaders or in those little conversations is, okay, what will it take to let go of that frame, that meaning that you're hanging on to, which is then inhibiting you seeing the strengths and the talents that someone brings. Because we can't even start to see that when we're actually still hanging on to, well, Rhonda does it that way. It's different to my way and the way I used to do it when I was in the team. So let's start to let that go so I can be open to what she brings. So I think that's the first thing is let's let go of some of that stuff. So I think that's really important. Then the next, yeah, sorry. What's your thoughts?
I was just, I do think that's critical because that's where that gap is that organizations have where things are dysfunctional, and I guess one of the ways I explain it is exactly that, and by approaching someone and saying something like, how most of us really like our jobs, like our lives, we're happy over the overall, but we have these little areas that rub us the wrong way. And these little things that we just can't, either they make us feel bad or we feel mediocre or there's something that's not working. And that's the gap. And it always has to do with you not living in your natural talents. I mean, you've got something that's out of alignment with who you are. And I think most people can relate to that. Would everybody agree that everybody has that 25% somewhere in their lives that isn't working? And that to me is where coaching and strengths-based living becomes a solution.
Yeah, 100%. So obviously we, as a group of coaches, I make the assumption that we've heard about the research into speed reading and the stats which are shared as part of the impact of that speed reading course and that huge improvement in the speed reading. I know some people still use that. I still use it in conversations with people. But I even go back and because people still want to challenge it and they say, how is that even possible? 2,900 words a minute. Did they even understand it and want to challenge it? So I actually really invite people with thinking about strengths and talents to think about those hobbies, those sports, those activities which they naturally gravitated to growing up. Those things which they just went, okay, this is my thing. It fills me with energy. I was in that zone of genius, that state of flow, and I couldn't wait to do that again. So from a personal perspective, Rhonda, I can swim okay. My swimming's okay, but I reckon I'd be lucky to swim 100 meters. Swimming is, this body not built for swimming. I'm not a swimmer. Yet I know I'm a talker. I know I can talk. My school reports all through high school, all through primary school were Murray talks too much. He rushes his work to talk to other students. He interrupts class. I'm going to show my age here, but I actually got the cane for speaking in class.
So that's cane?
The cane right across the hand. Wow.
Those barbaric Australians. I'm just saying.
But here's the beautiful thing. So in my workshop, when I run strengths-based workshops with teams, I actually have a picture of my school report from when I was about, I think it's 9 years old, 10 years old. The beautiful side story here is I rang my mum one day and I said, this was about 2 years ago. And I said, Mum, I want to put a copy of my report in my presentation for when I do my strengths session. And I've done my mum's strengths, which was really good. And she said, Murray, what year do you want? So I've got 3 brothers. Mum had 4 boys. And she just has this cupboard with all our school reports, all our little bits, even a lock of hair when we were first born, you know. In my mum's top 5 inputs there, that sure was built eating together. So she was just like, year 4 report, here it is, bang. So I have that in my presentation, and for me, it's just a beautiful illustration of here's this raw talent to talk, and teachers back then saw that of there's something wrong with him.
That's
he
right.
talks too much. Yeah, there's something wrong with him. Yes, it was a talent. It was raw. Go forward to in my working life, it was there, but then it was also unproductive. It was in the basement. It was, blind spots everywhere. I'm proud to say I'm working towards it being a strength. If we go to Don Clifton's, definition around that strength, it's that repeated level of excellence. I'm not there yet. I'm working towards it.
You'll be done when you're dead, probably.
That's right.
Like all of us, right?
Yeah. So what I'm trying to convey is whether that's that short conversation or people understanding what is this all about, it's actually identifying those things that energized you, which, feel like something you can't wait to do again. And imagine a world, imagine families, imagine faiths, imagine organization teams where everyone felt like that day in, day out with what they did. Mm-hmm. What's the impact on the culture, the impact on the productivity? So what that feels like for you. Imagine if your work colleagues, your teams, your family, everyone felt like that. Mm-hmm. That's what we're about. Do you want some of that? And people go, oh, can I get you a coffee? Yeah, I want some of that. Let's talk about that. So that's what it's about. Yeah.
I do think it's the way you position the changes in your own life, like you just mentioned, using the school report card. How many of you have your school report card? I found mine in, my dad passed away in 2005, and that's part of the story that I tell whenever I'm sharing a presentation. I always talk about how I found my 2nd grade report card and found out that I had unsatisfactory behavior. And the teacher had literally written, Rhonda cannot sit still and she won't stop talking. Well, that's still happening today. And then at the bottom, sadly, if you think about this, how sad this is, she said, and Rhonda is not living up to her full potential. I was 7, wiggling and yapping, which I'm still doing. If y'all see, I wiggle and I yap. Let's check in with our audience real quick and see what they have to say. Noreen is saying that she's done several 1 to 1.5 hour sessions for people who want an overview but aren't ready to invest. Noreen, I'd love to know what you do in those trainings, like what exercises. That's really what we're here to kind of collaborate on. Cheryl presents an overview of the concepts, talk about situations when they get lost in time doing something.
Yes.
Yeah, that's that flow that you talk about a lot, and to share their feelings during those moments. great. And let's see. Jeff Garrett, he uses this book. I hope you guys I'm sure you guys are serious strengths nerds, I'm sure. But in case you're new, this book right here is an absolute must. There's so much.
Snap.
Yes.
Snap.
Yes, you have to have this book because there are so many good examples and things that he shares. So that's important. And the allegory at the beginning, yes, where that poor little bunny rabbit, just terrible. And
So can I just say, Rhonda, something I've done with the rabbit story is I've actually printed that out into sections, and just like in class that we would have people read out sections to the class, I actually give that to members in a workshop and get people to read different sections.
That's brilliant. Again,
it's getting that engagement. It's getting people living it and feeling it as opposed to me just presenting it. And it works so well. And it takes, it gets the engagement, gets the activity, but also breaking it up a little bit where we actually aren't just presenting it, but we're discussing it as we go along. So what would that look like? How would the rabbit feel like? What would that look like in your world, or has it looked like in your world in the past before? Because I think that's really important, and it's such a powerful story. And I still reflect on Paul doing that on the stool at the front of the stage at the summit back in 2016. It was so powerful.
That's amazing. Yes.
Yeah. Can I just say another quick point that I think is really important? I have those concerns sometimes from leaders around that worry about, it's all about strengths and what's positive. What about the hard conversations?
Right.
Or what about the other part? So a key message I always give is we are not in a place of everyone getting to use their strengths day in, day out, 100% of the time in your organization. That's where we want to get to, but not there now. So we're not actually saying, let's flick a switch tomorrow.
Correct.
So a part that I actually share is it's not an excuse. So if we have an example I use is Rhonda's in my team and she needs to provide information for a report on a monthly basis. But focus, discipline, consistency, they're quite low. They're what?
How do you know this about me?
I can do some strength spotting. That's okay.
Okay, shush.
But what I say what's important is that's not an excuse that Rhonda doesn't provide that information. It just means that how do we support her? How do we have some systems or processes that help that happen? Because that's really important. And then as the strengths culture develops, how do we leverage and partner with other people where their strengths get to shine, where that's part of their I guess their makeup. And that's where I think that's important, that yes, we want people to understand what their talents are, provide an opportunity to use it, but it's also not an excuse when there's other parts that just need to happen.
So Noreen, let's see, Cheryl, she has incorporated her 3rd grade Catholic report card into her presentation. That's amazing. That is exciting. Yes, absolutely. And I can tell you this, for those of you who are you're wanting to get into high-level corporations and bump it up, that report card can be every CEO. If you can get to the C-suite, I can promise you, well, unless they're in the finance department.
Yes.
But, most entrepreneurs, they've had to break the rules. Most of them are activators, right? And so they can remember, they have unfond memories of being punished at school. I remember 2nd grade, the teacher trying to smack my hand with a ruler.
Yep. I was there. Yep.
Yeah. So I think so many people can relate to a school story. Yeah. Yeah.
I think 1, the school story. 2 is the second story or the second part of your life where you are just getting into, let's say, a business and in an organization. So, and if people haven't worked in an organization, it might be in a relationship. So luckily for me, I've got examples from all 3 of those. So in an organization, when I was in that zone of genius, in that state of flow, what did that look like? What was I doing? And when I wasn't, what was I doing?
Mm-hmm.
And how did I feel? And the story I often tell in my workshops again and with conversations is I remember I ran into my manager's office one day, Rhonda. I ran in, as you shouldn't. I ran in and I said, I've got this great idea. We should do blah, blah, blah. And he looked at me and he said, Murray, can you get out of my office, go down the hallway and interrupt somebody else and stop coming in here?
Oh.
So I felt that. I felt it good. I felt it hard. Yeah. And so I went out and I use this as an example of one. Here's a great example of a strength overdialed. And it was my maximizer, my communication, bang, let's talk. And a leader not seeing that I have a talent somewhere and how he could have responded differently. Obviously, he was frustrated. And then it's about that conversation. How does this show up, or how has something similar to this shown up for you before? And how else can we handle that where we create a different culture? Because I think that's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what you said earlier today, where you said that your wife recognizes now that abrasive feeling that we sometimes get in relationships, especially the ones closest to us,
Mm-hmm.
that it really has something to do with her, not you. You're just being you.
Yeah.
And it's something that's triggered inside. So that's a good, something good to think about too. So, hey, Kelly, let's see, Noreen says she has people read through some of the theme reference cards and indicate always, sometimes, or rarely sounds like me. And then they select the top 3 that they think represent them. That's great. Yeah, that's using some of the tools that Gallup has when you actually don't have results. They're at least self-selecting during that process, and you're getting close probably.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea, using those resources. It's similar to using the stand up if you always, or put your hand up if you're always type activity, because they're not using the words of the 34 themes, yet they give you an insight into those themes, but also just some different talents. I've actually included a couple of extra questions in mine in those slides. So one of those I use is, do you see little improvements that other people generally don't see? Again, it's insight into maximizer and things like that. Mm-hmm. I also use a question which is, do you often see the details that other people don't see? And these people that are quite focused, or do you see the way forward other people don't see? And you have people saying, yes, I can see a way forward, but no one else is already seeing that. Okay, so let's talk about that. So again,
fantastic.
Do you like to present information? So again, all those insights into those talents, which again, we go, okay, so if that's not you, what's the sort of thing you like to do versus those type of ones which feel like, oh, I don't want anything to do with that. Mm-hmm. I think just also something that pops into my head, and I'd like to hear from anyone that's on today in the chat, is my perspective is, because as a facilitator, I loved creating that space for conversation. And I think quite often what we might get asked to do is come and present to us what strengths is. Or come and present to us the benefits of strengths.
Yes, that's what we get a lot.
Yeah, where I'd say, actually, I want to facilitate a discussion about it. And one of the first steps is actually put some of these questions to the group and say, I want you to have some reflection time. I want you to talk to the person next to you. What do you know is that activity, that thing right now that fills you up? And what are those things that drain you? And then start to create a conversation with the group about those. Okay, now what we're talking about are talents and strengths. And now here's some data about why you should, based on all the research that people have done. And, Gallup have done stacks of that. And then, okay, now let's introduce the work of Don Clifton. And again, we could then use the theme cards and then talk about that and some more interactivity. And then we'll go, okay, would you like to know more? Because this is impact strengths has had on my life, because you can't beat a story like your stories, Rhonda, and the stories of Soar Pro coaches of this is what strengths has meant for me.
Yes. Yeah. It's giving the hope that people can have a change like you did. I think that's where you started out at the very beginning about how important that is. So when I think your suggestion that you have right there is so important, where when you are asked to do a presentation of some kind, instead you offer to lead a conversation.
Yeah.
So I've actually done that. I didn't realize that's what I was doing. Like I didn't come out and say, oh, let me lead a conversation instead. But what I spoke in front of 100 women at a forum, and none of them had taken the test, same thing. So I had to kind of talk around the topic. But what I did was I would speak for 10 minutes on like, here's what you need. And then I would give them a chance to share. So for example, I told the story about how I was too wiggly and too talkative and so forth. And so they got to have a conversation on what they were too much of.
Yeah.
So there were table tents on the table that had additional questions for them to have conversations around their own giftedness. So I thought,
right.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't use the same terms that you were, but that is what we were doing, is leading a conversation. Yes, please ask us a question. Murray has been at this for a long time and in leadership development in several companies. And so you have got so much experience. Is there any exercise that you would do that would be sort of formal other than the ones we've seen, like stand up if you've always? Another one I like to use is the handwriting experiment.
Yeah.
Sign with your dominant hand and then sign with your non-dominant hand. Is there anything else around there that you can think of that you use? And the rest of you, if you can chime in, that'd be great.
So I don't know if anyone online has been at the Strength Summits in Omaha in the last couple of years, but what I have shared at those is actually experiential activities. And for me, it's getting people up, getting them interacting, doing a very simple activity that sometimes what I'll do is during that activity, when it's not working or it is working, doing a bit of a timeout and saying, what talents can you see shining right now? What talents, who's doing what, who's leading, who's communicating, who's solving the problems, who's actually, feeling a bit frustrated. Why do you think that is? And then I guess a mini debrief through the activity, and then a real solid, unpacking of that at the end. So one of my most fun activities I love doing, and I've done it a couple of hundred times, is the tent pole activity. And happy to share the instructions to anyone online today. It's all about people working together, getting the tent pole and the fingers down to the ground, only fingers underneath, but maintaining contact the whole time in a team. Some facilitators use a hula hoop. I can't hula hoop, so it's not good for me. Feels good to move the neck, by the way, if anyone knows about my activity. But the tent pole activity is so powerful, and tent poles are a great tool because you can just fold them up and you fit them in your bag when you travel. Again, it's got people up, it's got them moving, got them interacting. I've done it in a room with 4 tent poles at once, 60 people. And then you actually start to think about, does the competitiveness come out? Does the support come out? Does, what's showing up? Again, what's so important is the debrief and talking about, well, what were these talents or these gifts that were on display? And so that's an activity I use. I actually don't like the marshmallow spaghetti one because I'm mindful of the waste that brings and food waste. Whereas there's a different activity I use with just a couple of bits of paper, plastic cups and sticky tape. And you've got to make a tower out of that. Again, gets people
Paper
up.
towel.
Yeah, and it works really well. So I find these simple activities that get people talking, interacting are really powerful. The other one I shared earlier this year at the summit is an activity using the Zoom book. And I'll grab one out of my cupboard and I'll show people that. And it actually starts out at the earth and zooms all the way into the, what's that thing called on a rooster? I've got a mental blank. The comb. It's the comb. The comb
it
on
is
the rooster.
comb.
Yeah. But it's a beautiful book because it zooms all the way in over 30 pages. I rip all those pages out, laminate those, and then people have to sort them out. takes about 20 minutes, gets them talking, gets them interacting, and then, okay, so how do we do that? What talents did you use to do that activity? Again, really small in regards to the materials you need, but a really powerful activity, get people interacting and seeing which talents can get highlighted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to grab that book
Yeah.
while you talk to the
Yes,
talent.
please do. I was just going to say, you guys, I have to tell you that I spent probably $100 on a few books a couple of years ago to find some of these group activities that, and they were very, first of all, several of them were out of print and they were not easy to find. So the things that you're hearing from Murray are really great. This is a book called Zoom. You can pick it up from Amazon.com. It's about $20 maybe.
I think it's more like $12 at the moment. But
it?
as you can see, a powerful, and I've got instructions for the activity if anyone wants that as well. Just, we'll make sure people can do that. But as you can see, it zooms all the way out to the earth. Like I was saying, again, just very simple. You find something like this and you use it to get people engaging. I find humans are doers. They want to interact. It's much more powerful than having them sit down, and it gets them seeing in real time these talents shining.
Right, right. So Dan Vincent has chimed in and says he's done something similar as far as having activities that really, and he'll call out something unique. So I'm wanting a little bit more detail here. Is he's still there? A leader couldn't avoid multitasking during a session, trying to work on little details because he was struggling to stop for a few hours for the workshop. So you're saying that he worked during the workshop on something that he was doing. Yeah. And so I'd be interested in knowing how you called that out. I think the whole point of what you're saying, Murray, in these exercises, and Dan, is that it creates conversation around talent, around strength, around triggers. I call it outhouse behavior because people stink when they get there, but you're looking for things that are going to cause people to pause and think, wow, there's that same feeling. Why does that keep coming up for me?
Yeah, you're right. It's those triggers which are coming up potentially in an activity because it creates a safe space to do it, as opposed to having a team or a group of leaders saying, or even couples, say, okay, list all the triggers right now of that person, because that's a dangerous place of, getting lots of blame and things going on. Whereas let's create an activity and a space where it's safe to talk about that. And then in the debrief, okay, how does this relate to how we work day in, day out? And how can I not see them as triggers, but actually as a brilliance that person brings that I can now appreciate?
Yes, exactly. You just don't. So let me just make sure I'm hearing rightly, or to reiterate, the only thing missing is the names of the talents. You're still able to kind of help people feel and sense and sort of get their hands around this strengths-based, talent-based, way of living, and why the benefit would be there, because you're making them feel things they really don't necessarily want to feel.
Yeah. So I can
or
imagine
you're helping them share things that they haven't been able to share forever,
Yeah. I totally agree. It's this, I've now got an opportunity to talk about these things that I'm good at or appreciate doing, or that someone does that triggers me. So I might have Rhonda in my group and I might say, well, Rhonda's always energetic. She's always effervescent. She brings this energy. She actually lifts my spirit. And this is great. And then the facilitator can say, okay, I love how you've identified that. And that's the theme of woo. And let me tell you what woo is all about, because what you're describing is the theme of woo. And in the Clifton Strengths themes, that's what it's about. And then you take those descriptions and help people understand where it falls in the themes. And that's our role as a facilitator presenter, is to then link it back to that.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times we are also, coaches, tell me if this is true for you as well. We are under budget constraints. And so sometimes a company has budgeted a small amount of money, and that if you end up having to pay for the test outside of that, then, you know, financially it's not as beneficial to you. So, and especially when, and usually this is a company, correct me if I'm wrong, this is oftentimes a company that's not ready yet to go full blown into strengths and talent development. And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
That's it's a good point. And I think it's that where they're not totally sure. They're not totally aware of that. So, and what I'd share with the coaches online today is a business development strategy that's worked well for me is if I've got a leader that's not too sure, or even a HR team, what I've said is, you know what, I'll say, I'll pay for the assessment. Let's sit down and have a conversation, and I give them a code. And then we sit down and I say, this is the type of information people get. This is the benefits. And I invest my time in an introduction to Clifton Strengths and the talents and themes. And they go, oh, wow, now I get it. Actually, we should get people to do this. And every time I've done that, they've said, yep, let's tick the box. Let's get everyone to do that.
Yeah. That's an excellent investment. Yes. Yes. It's a good marketing investment for your business to gift a code to someone in high influential spaces who may very well be able to open up doors for you. So I'm always a proponent of doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, within reason, obviously you have your own budget. You have to,
yeah, of course.
So
I think a process I've written down too, Rhonda, which I think, which is links to some of the stuff that we've heard before, I'm sure as part of our development, but giving people that critical reflection time where they can actually think back to those talents, those gifts, how they've shown up for them, how they've helped them in their success, but also where they might have got triggered by other people. And, you know, what could that be? Is it because it's actually, they see it as that's called a basement activity or a basement application. So that critical reflection time, and then okay, now what is the awareness for that now? And then I think the real step we want to move forward from that is not just the aiming or the application, but the acknowledgement and the celebration in others, because that then changes that culture. So, and that can be hard. I know it's hard in the Australian culture where, hey, we want to celebrate each other, but a part of our culture here is quite often it's moving forward to let's just get it done. Whereas that celebration in others just changes it. I'm celebrating that you bring that energy. I'm celebrating that you're happy to speak up. I want to acknowledge that. I want you to do more of that.
Yeah. And, you know, the good thing about it, though, is that when you are in a situation where you have 45 minutes or even an hour and a half, you can give people the opportunity to have a few minutes of reflection and to engage in conversation with others to stretch that time. So I know that when sometimes they're like, Rhonda, can you talk? We can give you 90 minutes, but no, we can't give you the StrengthsFinder results. It's like, oh my gosh, it feels like such empty space, but it's really not. If you build in that reflection time and that acknowledgement and the celebration of themselves and others.
Yeah, I think that, and here's the thing too, I think with that celebration, quite often what I talk about with people is let's not just celebrate those talents, let's celebrate what else those people bring to work or to the relationship or to the environment. For example, I've had people say, I really celebrate your expertise in Excel. I couldn't do my job without you helping me being insightful and sharing your tips in Excel. Or someone else said, oh, you've got this SAP, which is a big platform a lot of organizations use. People celebrate that. And I think if anyone is taking the time to acknowledge and celebrate what someone brings, that's what we're talking about. So I really encourage all of that because I think that's so powerful. Just on that 90-minute presentation piece, I think this is important that we all consider is how do we set ourselves up for success in that 90 minutes? And I think the challenge can be as evangelists and pro coaches is we want to give them the whole buffet. Hey guys, this is everything we know. This is everything we learn. Here's the data. Here's the reasons why you should do it. Here's my story, blah, blah, blah. And then, hey, I don't want to order. I don't want to eat from the whole buffet. Just give me the entree right now.
Right.
And the entree might
Don't be a fire hose.
A bit hard to drink from the fire hose. So we setting stuff up for success. We want to make sure we meet the requirements of those analytical people, those people that need a bit of data. So
Yeah.
here's a few stats, but then we want to connect with the hearts, with the story and the empathy, the harmony, those relationship themes. Here's what it's meant for me. What could it mean for you?
Yes.
So I think being mindful of how you set yourself up for success with a good level of detail so that people don't feel like it's the fire hose coming at them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that suggestion to make sure that you just drip a little bit. You just want to do enough to keep them interested and excited and wanting to come. It's, you know what it is? It's the art of intrigue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the art of intrigue. So, in fact, there's a TED talk on that. You may want to look.
Well, the other thing, and for coaches online today that work with organizations, I find that just about every time I go into an organization, people are just busy, they're stressed, they're stretched. They actually need some downtime. Mm-hmm. So, hey, you've got 90 minutes to go to this presentation, or you've got 90 minutes to hear about why strengths. You know what? I'm going to give you a bit of time to just go, what could this mean for me? And actually now let's have a chat to the person next to you or at your tables and explore that, because people I think they crave some white space. So let's give them that white space to create, as opposed to here's a whole bunch of more information why you should do it. Yeah. Tell me more forces us to listen. I'm just reading Maggie's comment, especially helpful for those high in question. The tell me more question is one I use regularly to let's explore what that could be. Totally agree. Rhonda, what do you think is any other challenges you think with this sort of topic we're exploring today around how do we, I guess, get people on the bus that we're on?
Well, I think it's always, you've touched on it. Sorry, I've got a tickle here. Ask your questions if you have them while I take a cough drop.
Well, Rhonda, this is good facilitation. Rhonda needs a bit of time. I'll jump in and say, I think some of the challenge are it's the why. Why should we do this? What are the benefits? So being mindful, and as strengths coaches, part of our role, I think, is spotting those strengths in others. And what I guess I'm proud of, I think, after the 1,300 odd people I work with, is when I'm in those conversations, I'm starting to see what I think are the strengths that are showing up in this person I'm talking to. And so when I'm talking to them, if I start to talk about a story and I go, that's not quite what they want to hear. They want to hear some data. Okay, here's a bit of data. Okay, so that's connected with them. Oh, so this is reasons why. If it's someone that you can see is more around the feeling, the emotion, the cultural impact, what it's going to mean for them, for relationships, it's the story, it's the change it's had in people's lives, it's the change it's had in my life, and sharing that. So I think it's that ability to have a few of those elements in your toolkit when you're connecting with someone, and then matching it to their talents so that they see, okay, this is what it can mean for me. I haven't always got it right. I've started to talk about the story to a CFO and he's like, well, actually, I want to know the dollar benefit. What's it going to mean for me? Same as, again, generalizations to be careful, but HR people, tell me what it can mean for our culture and our organization, what they can do.
Right.
So I think that strength spotting and then the matching and pacing, what's going to be best for them, is really important.
And I think we get good at that strength spotting over time.
Yeah.
At least right. Enough to where we can figure out a bit where they're headed. Like if they need more time, you can start to detect, or some of us can start to detect the energy, I guess, of that.
Yeah, great. Totally agree.
Yeah.
That energy and that response that people respond to in a way which is, hey, I want to know more. I want to understand more as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Okay.
Well, so any other questions or comments, pop them out here, because we have our expert on. I have been in your training before, Murray, and it is fantastic. I appreciate so much everything that you give to the community, and you're just growing it over there in Australia, sir.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Rhonda. Thank you so much. I've loved what strengths has meant to me as a person, as a coach, as a father, as a husband. I
Yes.
ticked all the boxes. Actually, I need to show I have a Made of Strength shirt.
Made of Strength shirt. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah. So, and it's something I'm passionate about because I've seen the impact it's meant for me and for other people, and I love the difference it makes in relationships.
Yes.
Whether
well, and I think all of the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think we're pretty aligned, I hope, and what I'm about to say is I think whether we're talking about at home, faith, organizations, teams, wherever it is, it's all made up of relationships.
It is.
And the impact strengths can make in those relationships so that people are enjoying their work and getting to do what they do best every day is so powerful.
It is.
I must admit, though, it's a journey for me in the way that I do work with organizations. I think some I've done really well. Others, it's still been a bit of a let's do this strengths thing because it's a good idea. And in hindsight, I could have gone deeper, could have been more organizationally focused to embed that and change that. And that's something I'm always trying to do better. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's when we do that, when it becomes just ingrained in the culture, we see the difference, we see the long-term impact. And so that's something that I think I'm always trying to do better.
Yeah. Well, I think having advocates inside the community and having that community, you know, where people are trying to work together for something and then having a system is important so that you can roll it out over time.
100%. And one of the things I share with my clients is there's little things you can do every day which don't cost anything, which have a huge impact. And it's those little things, which is recognizing, celebrating someone's strengths. It's encouraging partnering up with someone else so they both get to collaborate on a project and use their strengths. It's actually looking at the job design and how can we share it differently within a team so everyone gets to use their talents and strengths. It's actually having a strengths-based conversation around work and outside of work so that people are seeing you, recognizing them for who they are, not just what they do day in, day out. All these little things bring strengths together and they don't cost anything, but they have a huge impact.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I also think especially being able to tie the work to the home, like helping them see this is how they behave and so forth and how their talents show up at work. And then have them observe and get curious about how those same talents show up at home, because oftentimes it's different.
Yeah.
So yeah,
totally.
I agree with you. There are always little things that we can do. So, well, I am so glad that you came by to share with us, and I'm very glad the rest of you came in to join us. We will be having regular webinars every week. They're going to be on different days because as coaches, we are out there spreading the good news and evangelizing. And so we're not always in the same time zone or available. So pay attention to your email and we will get those out to you. Also, we have a new feature called the Soar Spotlight. If you are a Soar Pro coach, we will interview you. Madeline Mangray are interviewing pro coaches, and that information will be put out and you can use it for your social media. In fact, Soar is looking for very powerful stories that they can share and send out and use in the marketing. So I would encourage you to reach out to either Madeline or myself so we can get you on the schedule. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And we will be back next week with another, I think we're on next week. I have to look at the calendar, maybe the week after, for another Pro Zoom webinar. And we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. It was awesome chatting to you, Rhonda,
Thanks,
and
Marie.
just sharing some different perspectives. I hope everyone found it valuable. And if you've got any questions or comments from me, send me a message on the Soar platform, and love to share any information with you, and look forward to next week's session.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marie.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.